Hi, I'm Dan Weedin. Welcome to another Weedin Unleashed. This is our Monday noon Pacific time, 3 o'clock Eastern, and all times in between weekly broadcast. Thank you for being here. You may be hearing, excuse me, my allergies just popped up. You may be hearing Captain Jack playing with his ball down here, usually sleeping during this, but today he is joining us, and you can hear him down below. Excuse me, all of a sudden my allergies popped up. That's what happens on live broadcasts. So anyway, thanks for any of you who are watching this live and putting up with that. If you're watching later, thank you for doing that as well. We get together every Monday at this time to talk about best practices, topics, and concepts to help you in your business and your career. And we always talk about my extra points for the day, and that's what we're going to do here today. Excuse me. So anyway, couple quick logistical things. Number one is you can keep tabs on me through my newsletter, get my extra points at www.danweedin.com. Subscribe to my newsletter, and then you'll know what we'll be talking about. You can also follow me on just about any social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google+. So all of those places I am available to be connected with, and I hope you do. Today, our topic is temptation. Sometimes we don't have topics that sound as sexy as that, but today we've got temptation. And I got a dog who's been tempted. Look at this. Look at this. Here's temptation at its finest. Look at that. I left it on the floor. That's what happens when I leave my magazines on the floor to read. Captain Jack was just tempted to bite the edge off of one of my magazines. I better put it back up there. I get tempted by chocolate chip cookies. That's what I wrote about. I didn't know Jack was going to be tempted to eat a magazine. Maybe he's hungry. But I get tempted by chocolate chip cookies. Maybe others of you out there, it's the same thing. And so it just seems like last week, for whatever reason, we had my daughter bought some cookies. We had a whole bunch of cookies out there. And it seemed that every time I walked by, it was calling my name. And it seemed that whether it was after lunch or after dinner, I was extremely tempted to have a chocolate chip cookie. Now, and I gave in a few times. Oh, well. Here's the deal. We get tempted in life a lot. And the common theme about temptation seems to be it's a bad thing. We're tempted to do things that are bad, that are viewed in a negative light. And so, for example, just staying on it from a business standpoint, we might be tempted by some distractions not to work on a specific project. Or we might be tempted to waste time on social media instead of making the phone calls we're supposed to make. We have many temptations. I'd like to turn the tables on it because I believe temptation, while there are things that we're tempted to take part in or to have us distracted with, I think temptation also takes another look from the positive side. When we have that little voice inside of us tempting us to do something different that will actually be beneficial for us. So, for example, 10 years ago, I was tempted. I was tempted to go out on my own and start my own consulting practice. That was a temptation that I'm glad I listened to because here I am all these years later. When have you been tempted or had that thought come into your head, which is a temptation, to do something that changed your life for the better? Many of you may have been tempted at some point in your life to write a book. Maybe you were tempted to become a public speaker. Maybe you were tempted to start your own business, just like I did 10 years ago. Maybe you were tempted to take a class that's going to improve you. Maybe you are tempted to make a bold risk, to take a bold risk. I know people who've been tempted to quit their jobs and did so, actually do that. I'm sorry, it came out that way. Actually did that to do something different, whether it was to get a new job, doing something that they really loved, or starting something just in and of themselves as a new business. So temptation comes in many different forms. We tend to view temptation in a negative light instead of always sometimes thinking that temptation has opportunities as well. Temptation can be a good thing, and we need to listen to that voice just as we listen to the voice of the other temptations and say, well, no, we can't do it. So today's focus is on positive temptations, and I gave you some examples. By the way, it looks like we've got some people on board here. I would welcome you to enter your questions and comments. I see that, at least I think I put it up in time. We've got the blue box on the side. This is your time. For those of you out there who do have a question, do have a comment, go ahead and put that in and join the conversation. So what's that little voice tempting you to do that is positive, that is something that's good? Here's some indications that you might be getting that voice. You might be being told that in your head by you that you're not really happy doing what you're doing. You don't have a passion for it. You're just kind of grinding it out. You're working in a career or a profession or in a business that you don't love. The temptation is saying, why don't you do this? Why don't you make a change? And what's keeping you from doing it is fear. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of something not working out, as opposed to going boldly moving forward and say, this is going to work out. I used the example of writing a book. I've talked to many people who say, I'm going to write that book someday. There's a temptation in their head. I'm going to write that book, but they never get around to it. Fear, again, pops up there. In fact, fear tends to be the common denominator when the temptations that are good for us don't happen. He's being tempted all over the place. I probably have too many things on the floor today that need to be dealt with, usually magazines, and he's going after them. So Captain Jack gets tempted as well. What about you? What's that voice telling you? What's that positive temptation? What's one that you might have had recently that you'd be willing to share? Hey, you, stop that. Sorry about that. I've got a couple here. Q&A works, that's good. Dave, I got two Daves on there. Dave Clark asked, you said you were tempted 10 years ago to start your own business. Were you tempted before that, and what made that take the right one? Not any previous temptations to start your business you had. Really good question. I'm going to repeat that, Dave, because I'm not sure if everybody sees that. You said that you were tempted 10 years ago to start your own business. Were you tempted before that, and what made the date the right one? And not any previous temptations to start as you had. I think I was tempted before, but what I didn't have was enough information. I didn't know the how. There was probably a period of a couple of years leading into that where there was a great temptation to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to be in charge of my own destiny, so to speak. I wanted to create my own future, but I didn't know how. And it actually, the timing was such that some way or other, magically, it popped into my head, consulting. I really didn't know anything about consulting. I knew at the time when I was an insurance agent that I didn't want to own an insurance agency. That meant, what do I do? And so there was a period of time there where I really was tempted, but the problem was I didn't know how to move it forward. And so the right timing came about when something popped into my head that said, well, you can be a consultant. And actually, it was a series of things. Without getting too deep into it, there was a series of situations that had me thinking along those lines, because all of a sudden I was, in a sense, consulting people, and that's what came together. So when that decision came, things moved pretty quickly. But the answer to your question is yes. I'll give you another example of being tempted to write a book. That's why I bring it up. I'm now releasing my third book, but not too long ago I had 0 books. And it took me several years. The temptation was always there, but something was holding me back. And if I were to be truly honest, it was fear of not thinking that I was going to have, I had enough to say. Things, the fear of, why would anybody read a book from me? What is it that I'm going to say that's going to be compelling? And instead of it kind of digging into that as I did later, I let that, I left a couple of years out there where the book wasn't written. Now I've written 3. Now you can't stop me. So great question, Dave. I really appreciate that. I think that everybody has those, and that's why I want to try to bring it to the forefront a little bit more so that you can actually recognize them when they come. Another one, quote from the movie Up in the Air. I've seen that movie. How much did they pay you? How much did they pay you to give up on your dreams? I'd forgotten about that quote. That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. How much did they pay you to give up on your dreams? You know, so really take a look, take a fresh look at where you are, both professionally and personally, on some of those temptations that you get. I've focused on business, but you know what? These are personal things too. Have you been tempted to take a vacation? Think about that. I talked to several people who said, I haven't taken a vacation in years. Have you been tempted to take a vacation? Maybe it's time to do that. You know, have you been tempted to take up a new hobby, to take up or to revisit an old hobby, something that makes you happy? Why not do that? You know, as Alan Weiss has said many times before, I've seen him write it and I've heard him speak it. You don't have a personal life and a professional life. You have a life, and everything that goes around that helps the other, helps enhance the other. So think about temptation in a whole different light. I have time. I got several viewers out there today. Now is your chance. Dave had put some questions out there in a comment. Thank you for sharing. As I go into a final segment here, this is your last call if you want to share a comment on something you've heard today, or if you have a question, now is a great time. Let me give you a quick commercial plug for my new book, Unleashed Leadership. In fact, I've got it right here. This is actually the advanced review copy. Can you see that right there? Advanced review copy. I think it's backwards for you. But that's coming out here in about a week and a half. Very excited about that. If you'd like to get your copy at a significant discount, 40% off. Now stop chewing on that. You know, if you'd like to get it at a significant discount, 40% off, go to my website at danweedin.com. and you can get it there, and I'm signing all the pre-orders. So hopefully you'd like to take advantage of that offer. Also, as I mentioned before, you can follow me at www.danweedin.com, get my newsletter, find all my social media sites. I'd love to be able to connect with you. So that's it for today. We'll be back next week. We're on a roll here on Mondays. Monday, 12 o'clock. Dave Gardner got in under the wire, Dave. You got in. He said, I'm tempted to ignore the GOP debates, but don't want to feel uninformed. Last debate was 3 hours. Yeah, it was a long debate. Very interesting, though, as I look at it, from an ability to not only influence, but to communicate and to do so in a crowded field. In fact, Dave, you've given me something to write about. Here's why you guys shall be watching this. I just came up with an idea. Dave mentioned, and I think he was trying to have some humor in there about the GOP debate and the length of it and the number of people there, which I think everybody's agreeing that 11 people is probably too many. But here's the thing to think about in your business. Maybe you're in a crowded field. Maybe there's a lot of people who are in your industry, in your business, whether you're a consultant or selling something by retail, or you're a manufacturer, whatever it is. You have competition, and all that competition is probably doing very similar things to what you are and creating a lot of noise for the people who are your target audience. How do you stand out in a crowd? How do you become an object of interest? I actually think that might be my very next extra point. And I don't usually do them this early, but Dave, thanks. You gave me an idea. See how that's how it all works. Anyway, thank you for being here. I will be back next Monday. I will send out invitations through Google and through social network. But if you just remember to come back and join us here every Monday at noon Pacific and 3 o'clock Eastern, that would be great. So for today, Thanks to all of you for watching, whether you're live or watching on YouTube later. I'm grateful for your time that you spent with me. I hope that you've walked away with something of great importance to you that will help you both be successful and significant and unleashed. We'll see you next week.